guys from the streets, guys are like in music that are portraying this tough image, they don't ever want to be the victim on paper. Okay, so that's a huge deterrent from them ever talking to the cops. Now, did Gucci talk to the cops? That's going to be a big conversation we're going to have. Now, Gucci's from Atlanta. Listen, is he slithering away with the rest of the slimes? My bad. I mean, is he slithering away? We don't know. But he is from Atlanta, so if I had to log in a call sheet and make a prediction, it's Atlanta. We know how we get down in Atlanta. In the A, we know.
3 men flew into Dallas thinking they were going to a business meeting. They thought they were there to talk about a recording contract. They thought they were walking into a studio session. Instead, according to the federal complaint, they thought they were about to be executed. That is the exact language in the DOJ document. The victims believed they were going to be killed in a recording studio.
The Atlanta-based rapper Gucci Mane was targeted in a crime while in Dallas, Texas.
On a Saturday afternoon in Dallas, Texas. Gucci Mane, one of the most recognized names in the history of trap music, had his wedding ring ripped off his finger, his watch taken, his earrings pulled out, his cash gone, and a gun pointed directly at his face while someone demanded he sign his name to a legal document. And he wasn't the only one in that room.
He was called down there, thought he's going to be meeting up to talk business with a fellow rapper at a recording studio, and then, just like that, it turned into what federal prosecutors are calling a coordinated armed takeover.
One of the people he brought with him was choked from behind until they nearly lost consciousness. Photos in the federal complaint show the scratches left on that person's neck and wrist. But here's what really went down. These men were lured into a trap that had been building for months. The studio booking was fake, the meeting was a setup, and the people waiting for them inside that building had traveled from Memphis specifically to do this. To understand what Gucci Mane and the people with him actually went through that day, we got to go back to the morning of January 10th and walk through this hour by hour. Because the federal complaint is detailed enough to do exactly that, and every minute of it is wild. Gucci Mane is not just a rapper who got robbed. He is one of the founding architects of trap music. The man who helped build the sound that dominates hip-hop today. From Young Thug to Future to Migos, all of them have traced a direct line back to Gucci Mane's influence. He has been on the cover of major magazines, earned a Grammy nomination, written a memoir about rebuilding his life after federal prison, and by 2025 was publicly celebrating sobriety, family, and stability. This man did everything right coming out of his own dark chapter. He got clean. He got focused. He rebuilt. And the label he rebuilt, 1017 Records, was the same label that made Pooh Shiesty a household name. What the DOJ says happened on January 10th is not just a robbery, it is a betrayal. One of the most personal and calculated betrayals the music industry has ever seen, carried out against a man who just months earlier had posted publicly on social media saying welcome home to the very person who allegedly put a gun in his face.
9 individuals, including well-known musical artists, kidnapped and robbed at gunpoint numerous victims at a music studio in Dallas, Texas.
But here's what nobody has fully broken down yet. Who was actually in that building? Who Gucci Mane brought with him? What happened to each of them individually? And what those final moments in that studio actually looked like from the victim's perspective. Let's go back to 1 p.m. on January 10th and walk through every piece of it. Let's rewind to the morning of January 10th, 2026. It is a Saturday. Gucci Mane is planning a business trip to Dallas. According to the federal complaint, he lands in Dallas around 1 p.m. He does not come alone. He brings his head of security with him. This is standard practice for a figure of Gucci Mane's profile. When you are an internationally recognized artist and music executive traveling to an unfamiliar city for a business meeting with someone who has a documented history of violent crime, you bring protection. And critically, his head of security is an off-duty police officer, a trained, credentialed law enforcement professional whose job it is to keep Gucci Mane safe. He also has at least 2 other industry professionals with him, identified in the federal complaint by the initials MM and BP. The DOJ has not publicly named them. What we know is that they are described as music industry professionals, the kind of people who travel with an artist for business meetings about recording contracts, managers, executives, people in the business side of music who help navigate exactly these kinds of label situations. So let's be clear about who is in Gucci Mane's camp that day. Gucci Mane himself, the label owner, the man whose contract is at the center of this whole situation. His head of security, who is an off-duty law enforcement officer, a trained cop on his personal payroll, and 2 additional music industry professionals who came to Dallas to help facilitate whatever conversation was supposed to happen about Pooh Shiesty's deal. These people flew in together, landed together, and walked into that studio together believing this was going to be a professional conversation. Now, here is where the setup begins. According to the federal complaint, the studio on Dallas Parkway was booked for this session following calls made by Pooh Shiesty's father to the studio owner. The father told the owner that Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane were coming in to record music. That was the cover story. A studio session. Normal. Routine. At around 3:15 p.m., the recording studio is opened. Gucci Mane and his team are inside. They are in the control room, and according to the federal complaint, they are watching a football game while they wait. That detail matters. It tells you everything about the energy in the room from their perspective. Relaxed. Casual. No reason to be on guard. They think this is just a session. This is important because it shows exactly how deliberate the deception was. Pooh Shiesty's father called the studio and framed it as a music recording session. Gucci Mane and his people walked in and kicked back watching football. They had no idea that a 9-person crew was already in motion, moving toward that building. A little after 3:40 p.m., the 9 charged suspects come into the studio building and move to the control room where the victims are sitting. Now here is where it gets crazy, because even at this point, Gucci Mane tries to redirect. According to the federal complaint, around this time, Gucci Mane tells Pooh Shiesty that they could reschedule their studio session. He reads the room. Something feels off. He tries to pump the brakes and move the whole thing to another day. But Pooh Shiesty does not want to reschedule. Instead, he asks Gucci Mane to come speak with him privately in the attached recording room. This is the moment. This is the pivot point. Gucci Mane agrees and walks into the recording room with Pooh Shiesty. At this point, the other 2 victims, and BP, are still in the control room, separated from Gucci Mane, with 6 of the 9 suspects surrounding them. The split is not accidental. This is part of the plan. Get Gucci Mane isolated in one room. Keep the other 2 victims contained in another. Divide and control. According to the federal complaint, once they are alone in the recording room, Pooh Shiesty produces what are described as purported contract termination or release papers from a bag. He puts them in front of Gucci Mane and tells him to sign. Gucci Mane refuses. For real, Gucci Mane looks at those papers and says no. He is not signing anything. This is the moment where Gucci Mane tries to stand his ground in what he may not yet fully understand is a situation with no exit. He declines to sign. The 2 of them begin to argue. But that's not even the crazy part. According to the complaint, Pooh Shiesty then tells another suspect to go get his bag. That suspect leaves, retrieves the bag, and brings it back into the recording room. Pooh Shiesty reaches into that bag and pulls out what appears to be a black AK-style pistol. He points it directly at Gucci Mane, and he demands again that Gucci Mane sign the papers. On January 10th at just before 5 p.m., inside a recording studio on Dallas Parkway, this is where everything reaches its peak. Gucci Mane, with a black AK-style pistol pointed at his face, signs the contract release papers, but he is still not allowed to leave. According to the complaint, even after the signature goes down, the gun stays up. Pooh Shiesty is not done. One of the other suspects then takes out a cell phone and records Gucci Mane signing the paperwork. They record him being forced to say out loud that he releases Pooh Shiesty from the contract. They document it, on video, while he is at gunpoint. Then Pooh Shiesty allegedly consults with his father, who is also in the room, about whether the paperwork looks correct. The father reviews it and tells his son it needs a date, and so Pooh Shiesty forces Gucci Mane to add a date next to his signature at gunpoint. Think about what that scene looks like. Gucci Mane, his own artist's father, standing there reviewing the paperwork, an AK on him, being made to date a document he just signed under the threat of his life. Then Pooh Shiesty allegedly takes Gucci Mane's wedding ring off his finger, his watch, his earrings, his cash, his personal property stripped from his body while a gun is aimed at him. According to the Rolling Stone report on the federal complaint, Gucci Mane's wallet was also stolen, and that wallet had an Apple AirTag in it. That detail becomes critical for investigators later because the last known location of that AirTag was a parking lot directly next to the apartment where Pooh Shiesty's father has a lease. The stolen property essentially GPS tracked itself back to the father's front door. Meanwhile, in the control room, the other 2 victims are going through their own version of this. According to the complaint, Once Gucci Mane signed and Pooh Shiesty left the recording room with his dad and Big 30, the remaining 6 suspects turned their attention to MM and BP in the control room. Guns are drawn. The situation escalates. One victim is pushed down onto a couch and has his wallet and jewelry taken. The other victim is choked from behind. Not a shove, not a grab, choked from behind to the point of nearly losing consciousness. Federal complaint photos show scratches on that person's neck and wrist from the choking. That person had a Rolex taken, a Louis Vuitton bag taken, other valuables stripped from them. According to the complaint, at some point during all of this, the situation in the control room becomes so extreme that the victims, Gucci Mane included, believe they are about to be executed. That is the exact language they believed they were going to be killed in that room. Instead, according to the complaint, Pooh Shiesty allegedly put the gun to the back of one victim's head and ordered that victim and Gucci Mane to leave the control room in the studio. They were ordered out at gunpoint, not released, ordered out. The suspects left the studio at approximately 4:48 p.m. The entire incident, from the moment the crew entered to the moment they fled, took roughly 1 hour. 1 hour to rob one of the biggest names in rap, steal his wedding ring, force a contract signing at gunpoint, choke a victim near unconscious, document the whole thing on video and walk out. The crew fled the scene in multiple vehicles, according to the federal complaint. A Dodge Charger Hellcat, a Dodge Ram truck, and the rented Buick Enclave that Pooh Shiesty's father had booked. 3 vehicles moving together out of the parking lot of a Dallas studio on a Saturday afternoon in broad daylight. And hours before any of this happened, according to federal investigators, Pooh Shiesty's father had visited a nearby Staples store, the same office supply store captured on the surveillance footage the DOJ referenced, where investigators believe he printed the contract release documents that Pooh Shiesty pulled out of that bag in the recording room. The father allegedly handled the paperwork logistics, drove to Staples, had the documents ready, reviewed them after Gucci Mane signed to make sure the date was added correctly. This was not improvised. Every piece of it was prepared in advance. The moment the victims were ordered out of that studio, law enforcement involvement became inevitable. Gucci Mane had his head of security with him, an off-duty police officer who had been in the building and witnessed events as they unfolded. That is not a civilian calling 911 after the fact. That is a trained law enforcement professional who was present during the alleged crime, who knows exactly what evidence to flag, and who became a first-hand federal witness. The FBI Dallas Violent Crimes Task Force took over the investigation, supported by FBI Memphis, the Nashville Field Office, the Memphis Safe Task Force, and the Dallas Police Department. According to the federal complaint, Gucci Mane and the other 2 victims subsequently identified Pooh Shiesty as the person who had the gun and was in the recording room with Gucci Mane. They also identified Big 30 as the 3rd person present in the recording room. Both identifications are documented in the complaint. And then the suspects started making things dramatically worse for themselves. Within hours of leaving that studio, multiple co-defendants were on social media. Terrence Rogers posted a video wearing what prosecutors say is the Rolex stolen from one of the victims. DeMarcus Glover posted photos of himself wearing jewelry taken from victims. The stolen wallet with the Apple AirTag was tracked to a parking lot next to Pooh Shiesty's father's apartment. Greyhound bus records show that several suspects caught the bus from Dallas back to Memphis the following day, January 11th, with those purchase records now part of the federal evidence file. By April 1st, 2026, less than 3 months after the alleged robbery, 8 of the 9 defendants were in custody. Multi-city simultaneous arrests across Dallas, Memphis, and Nashville. The father taken at the family home in Cordova. Pooh Shiesty arrested in Dallas, the same city where the crime occurred. Big 30 arrested, 6 others picked up across the 3 cities. The federal complaint, formally unsealed on April 2nd, lists the victims by initials: RD, Radrick Davis, Gucci Mane, MM, and BP, 2 music industry professionals whose full names have not been publicly released. All 3 identified their attackers. All 3 are cooperating with federal prosecutors. This event changed something real about how people in this industry think about artist-labor relationships and physical safety. Gucci Mane did everything by the book. He traveled with professional security. He brought law enforcement with him as protection. He arrived for a meeting that he had every reason to believe was legitimate. His own former artist had arranged it, the studio had been booked through normal channels, and the cover story was a music session. Nothing about the approach looked unusual from the outside. And it still happened. 9 people in a coordinated operation had already been in place before Gucci Mane's flight even landed in Dallas. While Gucci Mane was in the air, the crew was already moving vehicles into position. That is the lesson that runs through this entire situation for the music industry. The threat did not come from outside. It came from inside the house. From a relationship Gucci Mane built over years, an artist he discovered off independent mixtapes, a career he funded with Atlantic Records infrastructure. The trust that comes with that kind of mentor-to-artist relationship is exactly what Pooh Shiesty allegedly weaponized to get all three victims into the same building at the same time. For the victims specifically, what they went through in that hour is the kind of experience that leaves a mark. Being held at gunpoint, having your wedding ring taken off your finger, believing you might be executed. One person being choked to the edge of consciousness. These are not minor incidents. These are violent, traumatic crimes against real people who flew to Dallas for a business meeting. The federal complaint's level of detail, the timestamps, the specific items stolen, the injury photographs, the room-by-room breakdown of what happened to each victim, tells you that investigators built this case with the victims at the center of it. The evidence is not just about catching the defendants. It is about documenting exactly what was done to three people who came to Dallas in good faith. Today, 9 defendants are facing federal kidnapping and conspiracy charges, each carrying a maximum sentence of life in prison. Gucci Mane, who has been through his own chapter of federal incarceration and rebuilt his entire life afterward, now finds himself as the victim in one of the most documented federal cases to ever emerge from the rap industry. He came to Dallas for a business conversation. He left with no wedding ring, no watch, no earrings, no cash, and the federal case that the DOJ says is backed by ankle monitor data, fingerprints, surveillance cameras, phone records, license plate readers, a stolen AirTag that tracked itself home, and social media posts the suspects made themselves before the sun went down. And the people who did this to him? They posted the Rolexes on Instagram within hours. They caught the Greyhound home the next morning, and they left fingerprints on the cups in the studio. No cap. The victims in this case walked into a trap, survived it, reported it, identified their attackers, and cooperated fully with the federal investigation. And the feds? They built a case that is about as airtight as it gets. Some people thought this story was about a contract dispute. This story is about 3 people who thought they were safe and found out they were not, and the entire music industry watched it unfold in real time.